Lizard boy run, lizard boy fly.
Hello, TheatreWorks, and thank you for clicking watch on this video. My name is Jeffrey Lowe, and I am the Director of Community Partnerships and the Casting Director at TheatreWorks, and I am so thrilled to be able to have a discussion with the creator of Lizard Boy, Justin Huertas. Thanks for jumping on this Zoom.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
This is your first time at TheatreWorks, and we're so thrilled to have you, hopefully the first of many times. And I've been at TheatreWorks in various roles for almost 11 years now. And it was one of those things where when I learned about you and I learned about Lizard Boy, one of the things that automatically popped up for me just because of who I am, like, oh my gosh, a fellow Filipino-American theater artist. I'm so excited. I think, I don't know if you have the same experience as me, but there are very few, and certainly not before me, any artists in my background, in my family. And I was wondering, how did you find the arts, both theater and visual arts, and how did that all come to be?
Oh, that's a great question. So I started off very, very young. My parents are pretty artistic, but not professionally. They just like, hobbies. They have artistic minds. My mother would not tell you that she is an artist, but she is. My dad, when I was really, really young, used to draw pictures for me. My favorite animal was an elephant. So he would like come home with like new elephant toys for me, and then he would sketch them and then like give the sketch to me. And then that just got me really excited to try and do my own sketches of this new elephant toy. And then that kind of evolved into drawing, all kinds of stuff, superheroes, Power Rangers. And that came to, like inventing my own superheroes. I invented my own Power Ranger. I don't remember what color it was, but I kind of went through a lot of grade school thinking that I would eventually become like a Disney animator. That was like my ultimate goal for a really, really long time. And then when I was in elementary school, when I was 10 years old, we got to kind of start picking up musical instruments. And I chose the cello because it was about my size, and I just loved the idea of like playing something like huge. So my parents were like, yeah, I mean, whatever. Yeah, let's do it. And that was kind of a hobby for a while until I got more and more serious. Through middle school, I was taking lessons, I was getting better at it. And then come high school, my new goal in life was to be the next Yo-Yo Ma and to be a cello performance major in college. And that continued through, I applied to Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington, got accepted with the intention of studying cello performance. And then senior year, I was cast in the spring musical, which was The Pirates of Penzance. And I was cast as Major General Stanley, the modern Major General. And I had such a ridiculous, colorful costume. So every time I entered with my big musical entrance, I looked so ridiculous that I would immediately get an entrance applause. And I was just like, this is it. This is my life. I have to be an actor. So I immediately went into college, changed my major to theater instead of music and cello performance. My parents were a little bit like not as cool. They had invested so much time and money into like my cello playing. And so they were a little bit less enthused about me being like, I'm going to do something else now. But the cool thing was studying theater at PLU, I was cast in a variety of roles where they actually had me play cello in character. So I was like the MC in Cabaret who played cello. I was Feste in Twelfth Night who played cello. And it was a really, really fun way that I kind of learned the magic of incorporating musicianship with acting, and what that does when it's a character playing my instrument instead of just Justin playing my instrument. And that kind of became like the passion. It became the thing. I just really, really wanted to get into like finding new ways to kind of like find intersections between all of the things that I was interested in. Musical theater ended up being like the thing that intersected all of my interests. And yeah, and then eventually down the line, like Lizard Boy was created, and then like my parents saw it at Seattle Rep in its world premiere run, and they were like, "Oh, okay, I get it. This is the thing that you're supposed to be doing." And so everything made sense.
That is such an incredible story. And I love you talking about that oh moment. When I first decided that I wanted to write plays and direct plays really early on, I don't think that I directly interacted with the intersection between my arts and my identity. I think that at first I thought that for whatever reason, I thought, oh, I'm going to learn how to be a theater artist. This wasn't something I grew up with. I decided around 16 or 17 I wanted to try it. And it wasn't until later on that I was like, oh, I think that I see where my identity fits into this, or where my identity is important in this storytelling. What was that journey like for you? Does your identity in all senses of it always fit into your work? Is it oftentimes in the subtext? I mean, I think that us being who we are when we write or direct, it's always going to be there, regardless of whether or not it's spoken. But yeah, I'm curious how that tends to interact with your work.
Yeah, well, Lizard Boy is the first musical I ever wrote. I was commissioned. I started it. I was officially commissioned 10 years ago in January, this past January, which is something we discovered during the workshop process that I didn't actually like realize. Yeah, I was literally looking through like the calendar and like looking through old drafts and everything, and I was just like, wait, I think I was originally commissioned for this January 2011. And then Brandon Ivy, the director, was like, so like 10 years ago. And I was like, oh my God. So I was I mean, like I was 30 or I was 23 then when I was first commissioned. And I was I mean, I was in the theater scene. I was a fresh baby. Like I didn't know that it was possible to kind of explore my identity in theater in this way. You know, up to that point, I had always been like, okay, well, Filipino people in mainstream media or on stage in theater never play Filipino people. They play. I was literally like in 2014, I was in a production of In the Heights, and like and there I've been in several like, you know, readings of new musicals where I've played you know, Chinese people, and so I kind of was arriving in the theater scene here in Seattle thinking like, as a Filipino person, I don't think I'm going to ever see Filipino people on stage. They will I will very likely be able to play other races, which was something that I was like really proud of back then. And now I'm just like, I think it's problematic that I wasn't in the Heights. But when I wrote Lizard Boy, like I literally was just like putting myself into the show. And I didn't realize until maybe the first run in 2015 at Seattle Rep that what I actually had written was about my experience being Filipino American and growing up in very white spaces. And that didn't occur to me until like I started seeing, you know, artists of color, young people of color coming to the show and telling me that that's what they were seeing. They were seeing like a Filipino superhero. And like, it's so wild to me that I was just like, oh, I didn't consider that. I mean, what I did consider was that I was making myself a superhero and I am not white. So I'm making a POC superhero. How cool. But like for someone to say to me, you know, what's really great is like, I'm seeing a Filipino superhero on stage. That was just like, oh, that's totally what I did. That's awesome. And then from then it was just kind of like, I had to like kind of like basically dismantle all the like structures in my head, everything that I had internalized about like Filipino people existing on stage. I had to just kind of like tear those walls down, because like the reason why I believed that there wasn't really a place for Filipino stories was because I had never seen Filipino stories. And and like I am now in this like really privileged position of like writing things that people want to see or want to hear. So if I am in that position of power, then why wouldn't I write, you know, Filipino stories? So yeah, I guess all that to say, I'm just like really enjoying um, bringing that into my work more explicitly, as opposed to just like writing something and being like, oh, wow, I guess it is Filipino. Now I'm like, I am writing a Filipino story. Yes.
Love it. I love it so much. And that brings me, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but that brings me to my last question for you, which is, you know, for us as Filipino American artists and Asian American artists, I mean, what do you see or hope for the future of us as a community of artists? I ended with a small question, I know.
I know something really easy. Yeah, I think I just want more. I just want more stories. I want more storytellers. I mean, like the Filipino community here in Seattle is very vast, and like there's a really amazing number of Filipino artists here creating stories that are like based in our identities and our families. And I honestly, yeah, I mean, I just want more. What I'm loving about seeing all of these things, because you know, Seattle is also the home of playwright, actress, artist, activist Sarah Porkalab, who wrote The Dragon Cycle, which is a series of 3 plays, each centered on a different woman and a different woman in her family, starting with her grandmother and then her mother, and then the third in the cycle is about her, and she's Filipina, and so like seeing her, even the earliest versions of the first play Dragon Lady, which I saw at a fringe theater here in Seattle. I saw an iteration of it. She just like kept working on it and then like producing it, which was amazing because I got to see it as a dinner theater experience where the food was Filipino food. And it was so amazing. And a lot of the food I hadn't had since I was a child. But the experience of seeing my people, my family on stage is just like, sometimes, you know what it is like I was watching Dragon Lady in the dinner theater form. I was very emotional because it was like, it was a Filipino story. It was a Filipino family. And the food was food that I hadn't eaten since like my grandma made me that food when I was a child. And I had a moment where I was like, so like white people get this all the time. Like they get these kinds of stories that they like super easily relate to all the time. And like we are expected to go to these shows, these plays, and like we're expected to sit there and be like, oh, I completely relate to this because it's about humans. No, like I'm not going to relate to every single white person's story because like we're not the same. And it's one thing to say this is a universal story, but like when the only universal stories you give us only show us one kind of story, like after a while it becomes like we can't connect to that anymore after a while. And for a lot of my childhood I convinced myself that I could connect to it, and then when I got to a point in college and shortly after college where I was just like, why am I expected to see myself in these white people all the time? It's just not fair. And then seeing Dragon Lady, and eating this food and watching Sarah, tell this beautiful story about her family. That was a huge moment where I was just like, wow, this is this is what it's like to truly see myself on stage, to truly see my family, to see my own grandmother on stage. Um, and everyone deserves that. So my hope is that we just keep making these stories so that we just give Filipino people in our community more and more opportunities to see ourselves on big platforms, to see ourselves on, I mean, you know, I'd love to see myself on television. I'd love to see, not like me personally, I don't need to be on television, but like I would love to see those stories on television. I would love for young Filipino people, I would love for, you know, like 10-year-old Justin to have seen Dragon Lady, or to have seen Lizard Boy, or the last World Aquatics Wrestling Champion, just so 10-year-old Justin could know, like, your stories are important and you should be able to like directly relate to someone on stage. You should be able to like, your story is universal. So your story should be shared on the same level as everyone else's, you know?
On that note of you know, us deserving to have our stories shared, thank you for being one of the people who is taking the mantle of sharing these stories, and may more storytellers like yourself and myself and Sarah and everyone, just this, the more the merrier. And I can't wait to share Lizard Boy with the TheatreWorks audiences here in the Bay Area.
Yay. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation.